Two massive warships sit idle in American ports right now. Each one measures 785 feet long, longer than 2 football fields. Each displaces 78,000 tons. And together, their construction contract alone cost American taxpayers $744 million, with total program costs reaching $859 million. USNS Montford Point floats quietly at Naval Station Norfolk. USNS John Glenn rests at her berth in Oakland, California. Both ships are barely a decade old, with nearly 3 decades of service life remaining, and the Pentagon wants them gone. Here's what makes this story absolutely wild. These aren't ordinary ships. They're expeditionary transfer docks, floating logistics platforms that can ballast down their decks, allowing hovercraft to float aboard while submerged. They can operate 9,500 nautical miles from home port. They carry enough fuel to supply an entire forward operating base. In 2022, the Marine Corps announced plans to retire both vessels. Congress said no. The ships entered reduced operating status instead, a bureaucratic limbo where they sit maintained but unused, technically capable of returning to service in just 5 days, though realistically requiring about 45 days for full activation. Meanwhile, the same Marine Corps just achieved the impossible with the McClung-Class medium landing ship, going from canceled program to construction ready in 7 months. $150 million each to support the exact same Pacific strategy. And sitting in those harbors are 2 $430 million platforms that could do many of those same missions right now. This is the story of how bureaucratic inertia trapped 2 revolutionary warships, while the Pentagon proved it could move at lightning speed when it wanted to. To understand how we got here, you need to know what these ships were built to do. The Expeditionary Transfer Dock was born from a simple problem. How do you move Marines and their equipment from massive cargo ships to shore when there's no friendly port available? Traditional amphibious assault ships cost over $2 billion each. The Navy needed something cheaper, faster to build, and more flexible. So in 2011, General Dynamics did something clever. They took the design for an Alaska-class commercial oil tanker and modified it into a semi-submersible logistics platform. Initial target cost around $500 million per ship. The actual contract came in at $744 million for both vessels, plus $115 million in long lead materials, bringing each ship to approximately $430 million total. The concept was ingenious. The ship's midsection could ballast down, lowering the deck below the waterline. Landing craft air cushion hovercraft could then float directly onto the ship. Once aboard, the deck would rise back up, carrying 3 LCACs, each one capable of transporting 60 tons of cargo at over 40 knots. USNS Montford Point was delivered in May 2013. USNS John Glenn followed in March 2014. Both ships were named after Marine Corps heroes, Montford Point honoring the first African Americans to serve in the Corps, and John Glenn celebrating the astronaut and senator who flew combat missions in World War II and Korea. For a few years, everything worked. The ships proved the sea-basing concept. They demonstrated the ability to conduct large-scale sea-to-shore logistics without relying on foreign ports. But problems emerged. The ships could only connect with other vessels in wave heights below 3 feet. Their payload capacity and accommodation space were reduced to cut costs. And as the Marine Corps pivoted toward a new operating concept focused on China and the Pacific, questions arose about whether these massive platforms fit the new strategy. Then, in mid-2022, the Marine Corps made its move. Both ESDs, they announced, would be retired after less than a decade of service. The stated reason? These ships didn't match the service's evolving needs for expeditionary advanced base operations, the exact same strategy that's now driving the McClung-Class program. Congress pushed back hard. In December 2022, lawmakers rejected the retirement request. The ships couldn't be scrapped, but they couldn't fully operate either. They entered what the Navy calls reduced operating status, maintained by skeleton crews, technically ready to activate within 5 days, though realistically requiring 45 days for full operational capability, but effectively sidelined from the fleet. 2 revolutionary platforms, $859 million invested, and seemingly no mission. But here's the twist. While these ships sat idle, the Navy just proved it could move at breakneck speed when it wanted to, licensing foreign designs, contracting construction, and preparing to cut steel on the McClung-Class in under a year. So why can't that same urgency apply to ships we already have? While those 2 ships sit in port, the Marine Corps is scrambling to solve a massive problem. The problem has a name: Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations. EABO for short. It's the Marine Corps' new strategy for fighting China in the Pacific. Here's the concept. Instead of massive amphibious assaults from big-deck ships, the Marines envision small, platoon-sized units hopping from island to island across the Pacific. These forces would set up temporary bases, fire anti-ship missiles at Chinese vessels, provide forward refueling for aircraft, and conduct reconnaissance, then pack up and move before the enemy can respond. Think of it as guerrilla warfare at sea, mobile, unpredictable, hard to target. But this strategy requires ships, lots of them. The Marine Corps says it needs between 18 and 35 vessels in a new class called the Medium Landing Ship, or LSM. And here's where the story gets interesting. In September 2025, we covered how the Navy achieved something remarkable. The McClung-Class program went from a canceled request for proposals in December 2024, when bids came in at nearly double the budget, to preparing to cut steel in just 8 months. The Navy licensed 2 proven foreign designs, the Israeli Logistics Support Vessel and the Dutch Damen LST-100. They awarded Bollinger Shipyards a sole source contract. They're planning to cut steel on the first ship, USS McClung, for delivery in February 2029. Cost per ship? The lead vessel will cost $268 million due to non-recurring engineering and setup costs. But subsequent ships are projected at $150 to $175 million each as production scales up and efficiencies improve. Even at the higher lead ship cost, that's still significantly less than one Expeditionary Transfer Dock at $430 million. These McClung-Class ships will be smaller, around 350 to 400 feet long compared to the ESD's 785 feet. They'll carry about 50 Marines and 648 tons of cargo. They can beach themselves to offload directly onto shore without needing landing craft. Perfect for distributed island hopping operations, right? Well, yes. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The ESDs can do many of the same missions the McClung-Class is being built for, and do them from 200 miles offshore where they're safer from coastal defenses. The difference? The McClung-Class represents the Pentagon finally admitting that good enough, delivered quickly beats perfect, delivered never. It's a procurement revolution driven by the Israeli and Dutch designs that were already proven, already built, already working. Meanwhile, the ESDs, American-designed, American-built platforms with 30 years of life left, sit unused because they don't fit someone's PowerPoint about the future fleet. The Marine Corps proved it can move with urgency when it embraces commercial designs and proven concepts. The McClung-Class is Exhibit A. So why are the ESDs, which could contribute to the exact same strategy right now, still trapped in bureaucratic limbo? That's the question keeping naval strategists up at night. Let's talk about what these ships can actually do, and how they compare to what the Pentagon is racing to build. Start with size and range. Each ESD measures 785 feet long with a 164-foot beam. That's massive, more than double the length of a McClung-Class LSM. They displace 78,000 tons, comparable to a World War II battleship. And with a range of 9,500 nautical miles at 15 knots, they can operate anywhere in the Pacific without refueling. The McClung-Class? Roughly 6,500 nautical mile range at 22 knots. Respectable, but not in the same league. Now here's where it gets interesting for EABO operations. The semi-submersible design that seemed like a limitation? It's actually a strategic advantage. The ship can deploy 3 landing craft air cushion hovercraft, each with a range of over 200 nautical miles. If you equip the ESD with landing craft utility instead, that deployment range extends beyond 1,000 nautical miles. Think about what that means. An ESD could position itself 200 miles offshore, well outside the threat envelope of most coastal defenses, and still deliver Marines and equipment to multiple islands without the ship itself ever approaching land. The McClung-Class concept, by contrast, requires the ship to beach itself to offload cargo. Maximum beaching speed, around 22 knots. That makes it more agile, but also more vulnerable. It has to get close to shore. It becomes a target. The Navy's answer is that McClung-Class ships hide through dispersion. Dozens of small ships are harder to track than 2 huge ones. That's valid, but it's also worth asking, what if you had both? Here's another capability gap: logistics sustainment. The ESDs carry approximately 590,000 gallons of JP5 jet fuel and have storage capacity for 100,000 gallons of potable water. That's enough to supply an entire expeditionary advanced base ashore and refuel helicopters and aircraft for extended operations. The McClung-Class, designed to carry Marines and their immediate equipment, not to serve as a floating fuel depot. Different mission profiles entirely. Each ESD can accommodate mission-specific equipment and personnel. The deck space totals 25,000 square feet for vehicles and cargo. These ships can carry multiple reinforced platoon-sized Marine units, along with their vehicles, weapon systems, and sustainment supplies. The McClung-Class carries 50 Marines and 648 tons of equipment. That's one reinforced platoon per ship. So you'd need roughly 4 to 6 McClung-Class ships to match what one ESD can deliver in a single deployment, though the McClung ships could hit different islands simultaneously. Here's a tactical consideration nobody talks about: signature management. In peacetime or gray zone operations, an ESD transiting Pacific sea lanes looks like a commercial oil tanker, because that's what the design is based on. The ship blends into normal merchant traffic. It's not immediately identifiable as a military asset. The McClung-Class, based on the Israeli ILSV and Dutch LST designs, looks like exactly what it is: a military landing ship. More obvious, more targetable. The ESDs also support multiple deployment methods: LCACs for speed and range, landing craft utility for even longer distances, helicopters for aerial insertion, rigid hull inflatable boats for special operations teams, unmanned surface vessels for reconnaissance. It's a Swiss Army knife of deployment options. Now, defenders of the retirement decision will point out legitimate concerns. The ships can only conduct float-on, float-off operations in wave heights below 3 feet. That's a real limitation in the Pacific's often rough seas. The vessels weren't built to combat ship standards. They're military sea-lift command platforms with civilian mariners, not Navy warships. But here's the counter-argument that's gaining traction. The McClung-Class has nearly identical limitations. They're commercial derivative designs optimized for cost, not combat survivability. One anti-ship missile hit in either vessel type is mission killed. The difference? The McClung-Class represents the Marine Corps, accepting those trade-offs in exchange for speed and affordability. So why weren't those same trade-offs acceptable for the ESDs? A 2024 analysis in the U.S. Naval Institute's Proceedings magazine made exactly this argument. The article proposed that instead of building 35 new medium landing ships and additional San Antonio-class amphibious transport docks, the Navy should return both ESDs to service and build 10 more ESD-ESB variants, 4 additional ESDs, and 6 more expeditionary sea bases. The math: 10 ESD-ESB platforms at $550 million each would cost $5.5 billion. That compares to 35 LSMs at an average of $150 million each, $5.25 billion, plus one new amphibious transport dock at $1.9 billion, totaling over $7 billion. The ESD option saves $1.65 billion, while providing more capability per platform, longer range, and greater logistics capacity. But here's the fascinating contradiction. The Pentagon embraced radical procurement reform to make the McClung-Class happen, licensing foreign designs, using commercial shipyards, accepting good enough over perfect. Yet those same decision-makers won't apply that urgency to activating ships that already exist. The ESDs remain in limbo. The McClung-Class charges forward, and nobody seems willing to ask, why not both? So what happens next? The implications ripple across American naval strategy, and they're shaped by what the McClung-Class program just proved was possible. First, consider the Pacific Fleet's readiness. Right now, Marine littoral regiments are forming and training for EABO operations. The McClung-Class won't start delivering ships until February 2029 at the earliest, and that's if everything goes perfectly. Initial operating capability for the full class? Probably in the early 2030s. Meanwhile, the ESDs could be fully operational in 45 days. The Marines are training without the ships they need. That's not preparation, that's hoping. You can't perfect distributed island hopping operations when you're using makeshift civilian charters and borrowed Navy craft. Second, there's the industrial base paradox. The McClung-Class proves we can rapidly field new capabilities using foreign designs and distributed construction. Bollinger Shipyards is expanding their Lockport, Louisiana facility. The vessel construction manager approach could enable multiple yards to build in parallel, but General Dynamics NASSCO in San Diego has already delivered 2 ESDs and 4 expeditionary sea bases, with 2 more ESBs currently under construction for a total of 6 ESBs in the program. The production line exists, the expertise exists. the supply chain exists. Building more ESDs would be faster and more predictable than scaling up McClung-Class production. Yet we're choosing to start from scratch rather than leverage existing capability. Third, consider the cost-effectiveness question the McClung-Class forces us to confront. If $150 to $175 million good enough ships are acceptable for EABO, with lead ships costing more, why did we invest $430 million per ESD in capabilities we're now saying we don't need? Either the ESDs are overbuilt for the mission, in which case, why did we approve that design? Or they're actually well suited for the mission, in which case, why are we sidelining them? You can't have it both ways. Fourth, there's the strategic messaging problem. China is watching. They see America develop the McClung-Class in record time, demonstrating impressive adaptability and procurement reform. That's good, but they also see America leave $859 million worth of perfectly functional platforms sitting idle while simultaneously claiming we need more amphibious capacity. That's confusing at best, incompetent at worst. The Heritage Foundation proposed in May 2024 that USNS Montford Point could serve as a mothership for counter-narcotics operations in the Southern Command Theater, supporting Coast Guard and Navy operations against drug cartels. USNS John Glenn, they argued, could be converted into a heavy-lift repair ship for battle damage repairs in the Pacific. Both missions address real operational gaps. Both could start immediately, but neither can happen while the ships sit in reduced operating status. The United States just proved it can move at the speed of relevance when institutional will aligns with strategic necessity. The McClung-Class is Exhibit A, yet two platforms that could contribute to the exact same strategy right now remain trapped because they represent the old way of thinking about amphibious operations. That's not strategy. That's cognitive dissonance dressed up as fleet architecture planning. So where does this go? The Navy has options, and the McClung-Class program just showed what's possible when bureaucracy gets out of the way. The simplest option? Activate both ESDs immediately using the same good enough philosophy that's driving the McClung-Class. USNS Montford Point returns to service supporting counter-narcotics operations. USNS John Glenn deploys to the Pacific for heavy-lift battle damage repair experimentation. Both missions address operational gaps. Both justify the activation cost, and both demonstrate that America can field the capabilities it already has while waiting for new ones to arrive. The more ambitious option? Fully integrate ESDs into the EABO concept alongside the McClung-Class. Use the McClung ships for close-to-shore operations where beachability matters. Use the ESDs as offshore logistics hubs positioned 200-plus miles away, supplying multiple McClung operations simultaneously through LCAC deployment. It's a high-low mix, numerous cheaper McClung ships for distribution, a few more expensive ESDs for sustained logistics support, different tools for different tactical situations. The Pentagon could also apply the McClung-Class procurement model to ESD modernization. License defensive systems from allies. Use commercial electronics. Accept good enough upgrades over gold-plated perfection. Get the ships operational quickly. Improve them iteratively over time. But here's the uncomfortable truth. None of this happens without institutional willingness to admit the retirement decision was premature. The McClung-Class exists because the Navy admitted its original LSM approach failed and pivoted radically. That took courage. It also took urgency, the recognition that China isn't waiting for American procurement perfection. The same urgency should apply to the ESDs. In September 2025, we celebrated how the Navy compressed decades of typical development into months for the McClung-Class. We called it a procurement revolution. So why can't that same revolutionary thinking reactivate ships that are ready now? 2 ships, $859 million total investment, 785 feet long, 78,000 tons displacement, nearly 30 years of service life remaining, ready to activate in 45 days. The Marine Corps wanted them retired. Congress said no, so they sit. But the McClung-Class just proved something crucial. When America's defense establishment decides to move fast, it can move very fast indeed. The question isn't capability. It's not budget. It's not even strategy. It's whether anyone in the Pentagon has the institutional courage to say, "We were wrong. These ships still have value. Let's use them." The McClung-Class showed the art of the possible. The ESDs are waiting to prove the same lesson applies to what we already have, not just what we're building. The Pacific isn't waiting. China isn't waiting. And 2 perfectly good warships are floating in American ports, waiting for someone to remember that speed beats perfection every single time.